Good morning, everyone. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. And joining once again remotely from their fortresses of solitude are John Richardson and Phil Harriman. Gentlemen, good to see you remotely, if not in person.
Thank you. Good to see
you.
Plenty to talk about this week. Let's get going. The Governor Mills' gradual reopening plan is far slower and more restrictive than many people would like, sparking something of a revolt among Republicans and some business owners. Some of them promising to defy rules that prohibit dine-in service at restaurants still. We had GOP congressional candidate Dale Kraft say the governor's actions stripped Maine business operators of personal liberties, so he's signing on to a class action lawsuit against what he calls government overreach into the private sector. So much for we're all in this together, but Phil, let me start with you. Is this a legitimate approach, for example, a class action lawsuit against the governor's executive order?
I wouldn't go to the courts to air this out. I actually agree with Dale that this is becoming more painful by the day for employers and especially employees. And we've got to pick up the pace of helping people get back to a safe way to earn money and pay their bills and help our economy recover. And the longer this takes, the more difficult this is going to be for the state budget because revenues have to be falling off the cliff.
John, you're an attorney. Is this a smart approach? Is this something that could succeed?
I don't think this can succeed. I don't really even think it's a smart approach. I think that the governor has been very clear that this is a dynamic plan. It can change. That change can occur when people petition their government and talk to the governor or talk to the representatives of the governor. I think best to do just like we did during the ice storm, and that is to work together. And I think that the governor will be very open to the kinds of suggestions and recommendations that business owners have, because nobody gets a plan right the first time. You always have to make changes to it. So even a business plan, and these business people know that.
And as an extension of that, many people feel that the 14-day quarantine order for people coming to Maine from out of state is far too restrictive and, in fact, could kill the tourism industry this year. It seems as though that's one place they're going to have to try to find some kind of flexibility. Right, John?
I do. And I think with testing, and I even think testing going into restaurants or testing going into campgrounds and that sort of thing would really help to alleviate the fears and quiet the fears of Maine people who are concerned that people from out of state are coming here and potentially, giving them the virus. So there are ways around this. And I do think, again, the governor's heard more recently, I know from the tourism industry, but they'll hear from others. And I do think we'll find some innovative ways to make changes. I do think 14 days is a long time for everyone. It's too much for a standard process, but I do think we can make these kind of changes. That's what this process is all about.
Phil, do you think we're going to be, the governor is going to be forced, if not doing willingly, going to be forced to make some adjustments here?
I think we have to look at the big picture first, Pat. Across the country, we have been in lockdown. We're not driving, we're not flying, we're practicing safe distances, we're washing our hands, we're complying with what the government says is in our best interests. So I have to believe that whether you're in Rhode Island or in Maine or somewhere else, that everybody pretty much is, abiding by the rules. And that's an opportunity for us to begin to open up our economy. Pat, 14 days when you get here, that's a 2-week vacation. People aren't going to come here in the first place just to turn around and leave. And most especially, people who are planning vacations, flights, rental cars, hotels, rental property, we're already suffering from what could be a disastrous year ahead.
Well, let's look at the impact on the state budget, as we've been talking about every week here. Governor Mills has now frozen non-emergency spending and hiring. Phil, estimates say it could free up to maybe $250 million, help plug some holes. These are not the curtailments that you had talked about last week, but is it a step in the right direction?
Sure, it is a step in the right direction. And I think the governor is going to be facing a much bigger problem than $300 million or $400 million. I think I don't want to create panic, but I think revenues are hemorrhaging in the wrong direction. And she's got to get a hold of this budget and keep it balanced. And it comes down to what's the definition of non-emergency spending. And as John will tell you from his days and my days in the legislature, the definition of emergency takes on very different interpretations depending upon who's in charge. She's got
So, John, what should the next budget step be?
I think she's taken a prudent step by making sure that we're cutting down the spending that can be now controlled. But I do agree with Phil. I do believe that curtailment is something that will happen. It's got to happen to right size, if you will, the amount of revenue and expenses that the state is going to experience. And I think that, frankly, you're probably going to see somewhere around $700,000 of
$700 million.
$700 million of cuts that are going to happen.
Former Governor Paul LePage said on a Boston radio broadcast this past week that he indeed will challenge Governor Janet Mills in 2 years. We hear a version of this every month or so, it seems like. Couldn't we wait till the pandemic is over, or at least till the next election is over, John?
Well, I mean, I'm hearing a Florida resident running for Maine governor. That's what I'm hearing at the moment. And so I'm not too concerned about the rhetoric. And I do think it's a little too early. I mean, we have a pandemic, and we're in the midst of a pandemic at the moment. Let's wait until we're past this emergency, period of time before we start getting into the political arena of who's going to run for governor in the next election. I just think it's premature, kind of taking advantage of, the situation when, we're all, panicked and worried about, how we're going to make a living. I just think this is the wrong time to be trying to make an announcement like that.
What do you think, Phil?
Well, I think if you want to get your campaign off to a great momentum, you don't do it in the middle of a pandemic when people are distracted and thinking of other things in their life. But it does go to show the passion that Paul LePage, whether you love him or not, the guy deeply cares about the state of Maine. He's so proud of what he did as governor in terms of where the state was economically and where it was when he left it. And I'm sure he's motivated by what he sees as very clear signs that the economy is going to move in the wrong direction, and he wants to do something about it. But I see John's point. Now's not the time.
All right. After being silent for several weeks, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden, has finally spoken publicly. He did so on Friday on MSNBC, denying sexual assault allegations made by a former staffer who claims this happened in the early 1990s. He said Friday it never happened. Bill, in the great scheme of things, how has he handled this, and how big a deal is it politically for him?
Well, I think it's fair to say that if you put the same conversation and put Brent Kavanaugh's name instead of Joe Biden's, the national media had a whole different approach to covering this story. I'm glad they finally did. And Joe Biden, from my perspective, gave a very clear and convincing statement. And now it's up to those who are investigative reporters to go in, as he said, look at the National Archives and see if there were any complaints filed, and we'll see where it takes us from here.
John, something like this is never good news for a candidate. How well have they handled this?
I think they were slow, and I think that they should have gotten ahead of this, and I think that he should have come out a little sooner. I thought that, as Phil said, he was very convincing in terms of his response. I just wish it would have been a little bit sooner. I am happy, though, to see that many of the female senators came out in support of him, and many are rallying around him, which tells me that there isn't any fire around this smoke.
All right. Senator Angus King and Congressman Jared Golden are among the members of Congress who have been calling for allowing remote voting for members of Congress and the Senate during this time of a health crisis nationally. Yet there's been resistance among congressional leaders. John, why do you think that is?
Change is hard. People say they embrace change, but they really don't. And as a result of that, it's been a rule in the Senate, in the House for a long time. But I do think with pandemics, I do think with travel, I do think with what we have today with technology, there's no reason why my representative or my senator can't vote on a particular bill, especially since they research these things long before they ever vote for them. I think the senator and I think Jared Golden are absolutely right. It's time to move into the 21st century and give everyone a vote.
Phil, how about you?
Well, I see it very differently, Pat. I think the notion that legislators meet in person and have hearings and have debates is essential to our form of government and how decisions are made. But I think more to your question about why legislative leaders are resisting this is because of that word that John and I know so well called caucuses, where legislators get behind closed doors by their party affiliations, and the leadership essentially says, okay, this is what we need to do to get this done, and this is how we expect you to vote. That's going to be gone if people are allowed to weigh their opinions and votes remotely.
What Phil's really saying is that there won't be any arm twisting. That's what he's saying.
Right.
It's hard to do that long distance.
Right.
Winners and losers in politics this week, Phil.
The winner this week is all of the associations representing the economy, whether it's restaurants or chambers of commerce, who are doing their best to help their business members get back in the game, so to speak. The loser of the week, unfortunately, I have to single out the Maine Department of Labor. Their inability to promptly process unemployment claims is hurting Maine people. They're my loser this week.
John?
I think the winner of the week is Senator King and also Jared Golden for their stand on making giving themselves an opportunity to vote long distance, especially during pandemics. It makes more of an open process, more collaborative that way. I also think, unfortunately, the loser of the week this week is Rick Savage, the restaurant owner in Bethel. He has every right to have a free speech argument about whether he should be open or not, but he has no right to be giving out the private number of our governor. That's just a bad move.
All right, John, Phil, thanks so much. Thank you for being with us on Political Brew. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.